Sofia Bianchi entered the oratory of San Felice before dawn, when the narrow Florentine streets were still blue with night shadows, and the scent of bakery yeast drifted down from Via dei Neri. The high wooden door moaned behind her, echoing softly against stone walls that had not heard Mass for 50 years. A single portable lamp cast a halo over the scaffold she had erected the week before, illuminating an expanse of blistered plaster the color of old bone. She tugged off her gloves, pressed her palm to the wall, and felt the usual racing anticipation, the same quickening she experienced every time she began peeling back centuries. She had restored Botticelli panels in the stately Uffizi laboratories and scrubbed soot from Giotto's shades of lapis deep in the Basilica of Santa Croce. But this commission held a subtler thrill. The Benedictine order that still nominally owned the disused oratory suspected that a ruined 15th-century fresco lay beneath later whitewash. It might, the archivist hinted, be an undocumented work from the circle of Domenico Veneziano, a spectral possibility that set Sophia's pulse skipping. She climbed the scaffold, dimmed her lamp, and started with a surgeon's patience. A scalpel, a soft horsehair brush, a dampened swab. One breath, one microflake, one brush stroke at a time. Paintings communicate in whispers before they speak aloud. Sophia had learned to listen. After 2 hours, she had removed a palm-size oval of the 18th-century lime wash. A swathe of ultramarine bloomed beneath, exquisitely dense, meaning the underlying hand was indeed Renaissance. Only a workshop flush with Medici patronage could have afforded genuine lapis lazuli. Sophia felt a grin spread across her face, even though no one could see her. She photographed the section, logged her notes, and resumed. Just after noon, she exposed the outline of a hand slender, luminous, gesturing heavenward with elegantly bent fingers. Above it, the first suggestion of a halo glimmered in gold leaf. Yes, she thought, the unknown master had skill. The brushwork looked early Quattrocento, the gold ground transitional between Gothic and perspective-driven Renaissance. Her archivist would be ecstatic. But then, one tiny anomaly surfaced. Beneath the saint's wrist, pigment had flaked to reveal a trace of crimson, far cleaner than surrounding hues. She leaned closer, squinting. The red appeared too saturated, too synthetic, to be 15th-century vermilion. She scraped 1 more millimeter. The line broadened, curving into a perfect semicircle. A bezel? Her heart hiccuped. She switched to a binocular magnifier, coaxing away mere grains of plaster. The curve connected to a band narrow, metallic, rendered in a precise grey seldom seen before the invention of tube pigments. At its center, half obscured by grime, lay a tiny dial with black numerals. 1, 2, 3. Seconds markers. It was a wristwatch. Sophia jerked her scalpel away as though the fresco had burned her. A modern wristwatch on the arm of a 15th-century saint. Impossible. She inhaled, tried to rationalize. Perhaps some vandal had bored a hole and inserted graffiti, later plastered over? Yet the pigment sat beneath the intact plaster overlay, undisturbed until today. She steadied herself and photographed the anachronism, adding a scale for reference. The Benedictines would want immediate disclosure, so would the Soprindenzas, the Italian heritage authority that licensed her. But Sophia found herself hesitating, drawn by professional curiosity, stronger than protocol. She decided, wrongly, she would later admit, to peel back enough plaster to verify whether the watch was an isolated prank or integrated into the composition. Over the next 2 days she worked furtively, arriving before sunrise and leaving after dusk, documenting everything but sharing nothing. Little by little an entire scene emerged. 3 figures in luminous robes kneeling before a central Christ-child Madonna, enthroned behind them. Typical nativity iconography, except each kneeling figure sported a distinct wristwatch. One displayed Roman numerals, another a rectangular Art Deco dial, the third the unmistakable round face of 1000, 970s chronograph. The tachymeter scale rendered in painstaking miniature, and still the rest of the painting drapery. Faces, the faint sfumato modeling matched every expectation of Quattrocento technique. Sophia stared until her eyes stung. The juxtaposition was no later overpainting. The layers were homogeneous, the pigments chemically united with original plaster strata. Whoever created this fresco had known, centuries ahead of time, about wristwatches that would not be invented until 1904. Time forgery, she thought, shivering. She climbed down, boots echoing on the stone floor, and sat on a paint-spattered stool. A memory surfaced. Her graduate seminar on connoisseurship, when Professor Calabresi told the class, "Every masterpiece is a message in a bottle, cast upon the sea of years. Our task is to read the message, not merely admire the glass." What was this message? A hoax? A warning? Or evidence of something she dared not articulate? That night, she brought her closest confidant, Lorenzo Amato, into the oratory. Lorenzo, a museum scientist who specialized in pigment analysis, was too practical for conspiracy theories. Sophia hoped he would debunk her growing dread. He climbed the scaffold, looked, and whistled low. "Brava! These is either the cleverest fraud I've ever seen, or a miracle." He extracted a portable Raman spectrometer from his satchel and scanned the bezel of the chronograph. The device hummed, then displayed a spectrum. "Synthetic cadmium red, invented 1910, he announced. "But the lead tin yellow in the halo is textbook 1440s, Sophia countered. She handed him a scraper dusted with blue. "Ultramarine, from Afghan lapis. You can smell the pyrite." Lorenzo stared at the wall, chewed his lower lip, and said quietly, "Someone has fused materials 500 years apart in a single intonico layer. You can't do that without a time machine." Sophia felt a pulse of both terror and exhilaration. "Or without taking the fresco off the wall, replacing it with a replica, and hiding the original somewhere safe," she suggested. "What if this is a signpost, left by a restorer like me to tell the future that the real masterpiece has been stolen?" Lorenzo thought, then nodded slowly. "A stolen masterpiece swap. The wristwatches are clues, timestamps. Hide the authentic nativity, graft a counterfeit in its place, embed anachronisms only experts centuries later will recognize, then replaster the surface so no 18th century faction notices. Brilliant if you think ahead long enough. But who in the 15th century would imagine wristwatches?" "Not the 15th century," Lorenzo said. "Suppose the swap happened much later. Someone in, say, 1920 steals the fresco, paints a simulacrum on new plaster, slips in a period-correct wristwatch for good measure, then re-limewashes over everything. But eventually whitewash deteriorates, and a future restorer like you uncovers the message." Sophia felt dizzy. "You're proposing the original fresco is missing, replaced 100 years ago by a copy that masquerades as 15th century, except for these hidden signals?" "Exactly." She remembered the joyous thrum when she first saw the ultramarine and winced. All her excitement had been built on a forgery's beauty. "We have to notify the Soprintendenza," she said. "We will. But first we should confirm provenance. A theft this audacious leaves records." They divided tasks. Lorenzo would run full spectral mapping, search archives, comb war-chair insurance ledgers. Sophia would examine the building's physical history, scaffolding scars, nail holes, mortar seams, for evidence the fresco had been detached. Daylight seeped through narrow clerestory windows as she resumed scraping. She reached the edge, where painted plaster met plain stone, and found hairline fissures, the telltale signature of a strapo, the process of peeling paint layer from wall with animal glue and canvas. The thieves had detached the original, spliced a new layer in its place, and disguised the circumference with filler. Sophia shuddered. Strapo, done poorly, tears art like flayed skin. But here the thieves were expert. Their only mistake had been hubris. Embedding a puzzle they assumed no early restorer would expose. By evening, Lorenzo returned, breathless. "Look!" He unfolded microphone prints from the Florentine Insurance Registry, dated December 1943. The Nazis had requisitioned dozens of Tuscan artworks for safekeeping, including unidentified nativity fresco, Circle of Domenico Veneziano, property of the Benedictine Order of San Felice, lost during transport, Sophia read. Insurance paid out 50,000 lire to the monastery after the war. So the fresco vanished in 1943, Lorenzo confirmed. What you're uncovering is a replacement installed afterwards. My guess? Allied restitution teams, overwhelmed, never inspected the oratory. The monks accepted reimbursement, the wall was replastered, and everyone moved on, except the forgers left their horological Easter eggs, Sophia murmured. She imagined German officers cutting the painting from the wall under moonlight. Perhaps a local restorer, coerced or willing, fabricated a substitute. He could not sign his name, but he could paint objects from his own era, the wristwatches on German wrists, to chronicle the crime. Then he hid the copy behind benign plaster, trusting a future colleague to understand. Sophia's chest tightened with grief. She had handled many wounded artworks, but never a fresco that begged for rescue from beyond its own grave. Next morning they summoned Chiara Rinaldi, the regional inspector from Soprindenza. She was trim, severe, and unamused by theories. She peered at the fresco, listened to Sophia and Lorenzo, then said, "We will impound the site until authenticity is established." Her tone suggested skepticism. Sophia forced calm. "Inspector, please authorize removal of the current strappo. If it's really modern, taking it off could reveal damage, outlines, matching transport records." Rinaldi sighed. "Very well, but no further excavation without official conservators present." Sophia spent a sleepless night drafting method statements, obtaining permission to reheat hide glue. At dawn she, Lorenzo, and two Soprintendenza technicians pressed cotton canvas strips onto the fresco face with warm glue. As it cooled, the adhesive gripped paint. They waited 3 hours, then peeled. The uppermost layer lifted like shedding skin, revealing raw orecchio, the coarse underplaster beneath. But in one central rectangle, they found not rough plaster, but a hollow cavity, filled with bricks mortared loosely, as though to disguise empty space. Rinaldi's eyebrows shot upward. "Open it!" They chiseled gently. Behind the bricks appeared a cylindrical metal canister sealed with lead solder, stamped with a Luftwaffe eagle insignia. Cold red rippled through the oratory. Sophia's gloves trembled as she helped ease the canister free. Inside, nested in cotton batting, lay a rolled canvas. A nativity scene rendered in the softer palette of early Renaissance. No wristwatch in sight, Christ-child radiant, Madonna serene, shepherds hushed in wonder. They unrolled enough to spot a minuscule monogram. DV, entwined, the mark of Domenico Veneziano himself. Sophia swallowed a sob. The authentic masterpiece had been hidden inside the wall all along, never trafficked to Germany, never lost, only entombed by someone who perhaps meant to retrieve it after the war but never returned. The wristwatch fresco was not a signal of theft, but of protection, a decoy shielding the genuine treasure. Inspector Rinaldi signed the emergency conservation order with shaking hands. The canister and painting were transported under armed escort to the Operchizio delle Pietradere laboratory for stabilization. Anticipation of world headlines pulsed through every phone call and email. But Sophia's prevailing emotion was humility. An anonymous wartime restorer had outwitted both plunderers and bureaucrats to safeguard beauty, and had enlisted the language of anachronism with wristwatches to warn the future without alerting the past. 2 weeks later, the Operficio's clean room smelled of clove oil and starch paste, as Sophia oversaw the canvas's humidification. Cracking had spared the central figures, proof the cylinder's tight roll had been calculated by someone who loved the work. Under magnification, the Pigments cradle matched 15th century drying patterns exactly. Carbon-14 tests of stray fiber fragments placed the linen at 1445 plus or minus 15 years. Even the Vatican's dour liaison conceded authenticity. The media predictably nicknamed the find the time traveler's Madonna. Reporters demanded explanations for the wristwatches, spinning tales of prophecy and temporal rifts. Sophia stuck to evidence. A 20th century artist painted a sacrificial decoy to protect the original during wartime. Yet she could not help letting the mythic overtones linger. After all, the decoy artist had used time itself as camouflage. One rainy evening, she met Lorenzo on the Ponte Vecchio, floodlights shimmering off the Arno. They shared cones of pistachio gelato and watched tourists photograph goldsmith displays. "Do you think he intended us to find it now, in 2023? She asked. "Maybe he intended someone like you. Someone who respects whispers," Lorenzo replied. He bumped her shoulder with his. He calculated that restoration cycles average 75 years. He trusted the craft more than governments. Sophia smiled tiredly. "I wish we knew his name. He deserved credit." "We might," Lorenzo said, fishing a folded document from his coat. The canvas cylinder included a ration card dated 1944, signed by Captain Klaus Ritter, Luftwaffe engineer turned art officer. But the signature on the bottom is Italian. "For posterity, by the hand of G.S." Sophia gasped. "Giuseppe Sassetti. He apprenticed under my great-grandfather. Nonno used to tell stories. Giuseppe vanished during the war." Lorenzo grinned. "Legacy fulfilled." Sophia stared across the river, imagining Sassetti under blackout conditions, racing against Nazi trucks to paste his own modernized fresco. Embed wristwatches he saw on German wrists, brick the real nativity inside the wall, and pray some future restorer would see the anomaly, read the note in the canister, and finish his mission. She felt a kinship transcending decades. Two restorers, partners in a relay of guardianship. The Benedictine order petitioned to reinstall the authentic fresco in a climate-controlled chapel open to the public. The sacrificial wristwatch copy, flaked and fragile, would hang beside it as testimony to silent resistance. The oratory would become a double lesson: art's vulnerability and art's resilience when artisans conspire against time. On opening day, sunlight streamed through repaired windows. Scholars, clergy, and dignitaries packed rows of folding chairs. Sophia stood at the back, letting others claim the spotlight. Cardinal Rossi blessed the fresco, intoning Latin that echoed off stone like distant thunder. When applause subsided, the cardinal gestured for the restorer to speak. Sophia hesitated, then walked to the lectern. She glanced at the unveiled nativity. Madonna's eyes seemed to meet hers, gentle, grateful. "In Florence," she began, "we say the stones remember. Tonight we honor two memories: the genius of Domenico Veneziano and the courage of Giuseppe Sassetti, who risked everything to save this masterpiece. He could not trust armies or governments, so he trusted future hands. He used an object of his present, a wristwatch, to signpost danger. He taught us that preservation is a conversation across centuries, requiring vigilance, skill, and imagination." Her gaze swept the audience. "If you visit the oratory, notice that the saint in Sassetti's fresco still wears his watch. We chose not to erase it. It reminds us that time is both destroyer and collaborator. We cannot halt its passage, but we can, with compassion and craft, decide what survives the flood," Sophia concluded, heart thudding. The hall was silent for a beat, then filled with applause that felt like warm rain. That night she returned alone to San Felice. The lights were off, the air cool. She climbed the scaffold one last time and looked at the wristwatch fresco, now fully stabilized, its modern anomalies gleaming faintly. She raised her wrist, checking her own watch, a gift from Lorenzo, engraved with today's date, and felt the delicate gears tick beneath her skin. "Message received," she whispered to the wall. Outside, the city's bells marked the hour, their ancient iron tongues swinging through darkness, stitching past and present into the same unbroken rhythm.